How do I look? Okay. So yesterday, Keno gets back to the beach from finding his pearl, and it's like before he's even made it home, the whole town knows that he has found this pearl. Okay, and it compares the town to a scorpion, and it talks about the poison sacs of the town began to manufacture venom. It was talking about his people's jealousy because everybody wants a piece of this pearl. Now, Keno and Juana, they think that because they're happy and excited about their good fortune, that everyone else is also happy and excited about their good fortune. But the truth is, the other people are only happy and excited for them for as much as it will help others, okay? The rest of the town doesn't really care about Keno and Juana. They care about their own selves and their own families. So when we left off, the priest, we're going to get to the doctor. The priest had come to visit, and he gave Keno this speech about thou art named after a great father of the church and this and that, and we know that's a lie. There's nobody in the Bible or any saint or priest or whatever named Father Keno, okay? So that was a lie. He's obviously trying to, sink his teeth into something that he can get for himself. Then the doctor, when he heard about it, he said, oh, I know this man. I'm treating his son for a scorpion sting. And we obviously know that isn't true. And the doctor then showed up, and Keno says, oh, my kid's okay now. Thanks, but no thanks, man. And he was kind of curt to him, it says. And the doctor says, well, man, the problem is, with a scorpion sting, you might think it's going away, but then when it comes back, it'll be over in a hurry. So it kind of scares Keno into letting the doctor evaluate Coyotito. So let's look on page 31. We're going to start on the paragraph. It's actually the second paragraph. It says, hold the light, the doctor said. We're going to start there. We actually read this paragraph yesterday, but as y'all know, I think it's a little easier to reread a paragraph or two to get back into the natural feel of the story. So we're gonna start there, and we'll stop periodically and discuss. And obviously, if you have any questions, just raise your hand. We're going to read to the end of chapter 3. Here we go. Hold the light, the doctor said. And when the servant held the lantern high, the doctor looked for a moment at the wound on the baby's shoulder. He was thoughtful for a moment, and then he rolled back the baby's eyelid and looked at the eyeball. He nodded his head while Coyotito struggled against him. It is as I thought, he said. The poison has gone inward, and it will strike soon. Come look. He held the eyelid down. See, it is blue. And Keno, looking anxiously, saw that indeed it was a little blue, and he didn't know whether or not it was always a little blue, but the trap was set, and he couldn't take the chance. The doctor's eyes watered in their little hammocks. I will give him something to try to turn the poison aside, he said, and he handed the baby to Keno. Then from his bag, he took a little bottle of white powder and a capsule of gelatin. He filled the capsule with powder and closed it, and then around the first capsule, he fitted a second capsule and closed it. Then he worked very deftly. He took the baby and pinched its lower lip until it opened its mouth. His fat fingers placed the capsule far back on the baby's tongue, back of the point where he could spit it out. And then from the floor, he picked up the little pitcher of pulp and gave Coyotito a drink, and it was done. He looked again at the baby's eyeball, and he pursed his lips and seemed to think. At last, he handed the baby back to Juana, and he turned to Keno. I think the poison will attack within the hour, he said. The medicine may save the baby from hurt, but I will come back in an hour. Perhaps I am in time to save him. He took a deep breath and went out of the hut, and his servant followed him with the lantern. Now Juana had the baby under her shawl, and she stared at it with anxiety and fear. Keno came to her, and he lifted the shawl and stared at the baby. He moved his hand to look under the eyelid, and only then saw that the pearl was still in his hand. Then he went to a box by the wall, and from it he brought a piece of rag. He wrapped the pearl in the rag, then went to the corner of the brush house and dug a little hole with his fingers in the dirt floor. And he put the pearl in the hole and covered it up and concealed the place. And then he went to the fire where Juana was squatting, watching the baby's face. So Keno, to hide the pearl, he dug a little hole in his floor and put the pearl in it, covered it up. And by the way, what do y'all think the doctor did to the baby?
He made him sick.
He obviously made him sick. The doctor, back in his house, settled in his chair and looked at his watch. The people brought him a little supper of chocolate and sweet cakes and fruit, and he stared at the food discontentedly. In the houses of the neighbors, the doctor that would lead all conversations for a long time to come the subject that would lead all conversations for a long time to come was aired for the first time to see how it would go. The neighbors showed one another with their thumbs how big the pearl was. And they made little caressing gestures to show how lovely it was. From now on, they would watch Kino and Juana very closely to see whether riches turned their heads, as riches turn all people's heads. Everyone knew why the doctor had come. He was not good at dissembling, and he was very well understood. Out in the estuary, a tight-woven school of small fishes glittered and broke water to escape a school of great fishes that drove in to eat them. And in the houses, the people could hear the swish of the small ones and the bouncing splash of the great ones as the slaughter went on. The dampness arose out of the gulf and was deposited on bushes and cacti and on little trees and salty drops. And the night mice crept about on the ground, and the little night hawks hunted them silently. The skinny black puppy with flame spots over his eyes came to Kino's door and looked in. He nearly shook his hindquarters loose when Kino glanced up at him, and he subsided when Kino looked away. The puppy did not enter the house, but he watched with frantic interest while Kino ate his beans from the little pottery dish and wiped it clean with a corn cake, and ate the cake and washed the whole down with a drink of pulque. Kino was finished and was rolling a cigarette when Juana spoke sharply. "Kino!" He glanced at her and then got up and went quickly to her, for he saw fright in her eyes. He stood over her, looking down, but the light was very dim. He kicked a pile of twigs into the fire hole to make a blaze, and then he could see the face of Coyotito. The baby's face was flushed and his throat was working, and a little thick drool of saliva issued from his lips. The spasm of the stomach muscles began, and the baby was very sick. Kino knelt beside his wife. "So the doctor knew," he said. But he said it for himself as well as for his wife, for his mind was hard and suspicious, and he was remembering the white powder. Juana rocked from side to side and moaned out the little song of the family as though it could ward off the danger. And the baby vomited and writhed in her arms. Now uncertainty was in Kino, and the music of the evil throbbed in his head and nearly drove out Juana's song. The doctor finished his chocolate and nibbled the little fallen pieces of sweet cake. He brushed his fingers on a napkin, looked at his watch, arose, and took up his little bag. The news of the baby's illness traveled quickly among the brush houses, for sickness is second only to hunger as the enemy of poor people. And some said softly, "Luck, you see, brings bitter friends." And they nodded and got up to go to Kino's house. The neighbors scuttled with covered noses through the dark until they crowded into Kino's house again. They stood and gazed, and they made little comments on the sadness that this could happen at such a time of joy, and they said, "All things are in God's hands." The old women squatted down beside Juana to try to give her aid if they could and comfort if they could not. Then the doctor hurried in, followed by his man. He scattered the old women like chickens. He took the baby and examined it and felt its head. "The poison, it has worked," he said. "I think I can defeat it. I will try my best." He asked for water, and in the cup of it, he put 3 drops of ammonia, and he pried open the baby's mouth and poured it down. The baby spluttered and screeched under the treatment, and Juana watched him with haunted eyes. The doctor spoke a little as he worked. "It is lucky that I know about the poison of the scorpion. Otherwise," and he shrugged to show what could have happened. But Kino was suspicious, and he could not take his eyes from the doctor's open bag and from the bottle of white powder there. Gradually, the spasm subsided, and the baby relaxed under the doctor's hands. And then Coyotito sighed deeply and went to sleep, for he was very tired with vomiting. So look, has Kino figured out that he was hosed? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So the doctor, an hour or two ago, gave the baby some type of poison. He knew the baby was well, but the doctor is greedy. So he gave the baby some type of poison, and he shows back up with the antidote. He gives it to the baby, and all of a sudden now the baby's better again. Now, let's check out what the doctor's going to do. The doctor was closing his bag now. He said, "When do you think you can pay this bill?" He said it even kindly. "When I have sold my pearl, I will pay you," Kino said. "You have a pearl? A good pearl?" The doctor asked with interest. What's the doctor doing right there?
He's trying to act like he didn't know.
That's exactly right. And then the chorus of the neighbors broke in. See, Kino, it just, the neighbors are too dumb to realize that the doctor is completely putting them on. But pay attention to how they are. They won't shut their mouths. It's just not their business. Anyway, it says, the chorus of the neighbors broke in. "He has found the pearl of the world," they cried. They joined forefinger with thumb to show how great the pearl was. "Kino will be a rich man," they clamored. "It is a pearl such as one has never seen." The doctor looked surprised. "I had not heard of it. Do you keep this pearl in a safe place? Perhaps you would like me to put it in my safe." Kino's eyes were hooded now. His cheeks were drawn taut. "I have it secure," he said. "Tomorrow I will sell it, and then I will pay you." The doctor shrugged, and his wet eyes never left Kino's eyes. He knew the pearl would be buried in the house, and he thought Kino might look toward the place where it was buried. "It would be a shame to have it stolen before you could sell it," the doctor said. And he saw Kino's eyes flick involuntarily to the floor near the side post of the brush house. So what did Kino's eyes just tell the doctor?
Where's that?
Just told him where the pearl's hidden. Kino's just not very bright. When the doctor had gone and all the neighbors had reluctantly returned to their houses, Kino squatted beside the little glowing coals in the fire hole and listened to the night sound. The soft sweep of the little waves on the shore and the distant barking of dogs, the creeping of the breeze through the brush house roof, and the soft speech of his neighbors in their houses in the village. For these people do not sleep soundly all night. They awaken at intervals and talk a little and then go to sleep again. And after a while, Kino got up and went to the door of his house. He smelled the breeze and he listened for any foreign sound of secrecy or creeping, and his eyes searched the darkness. For the music of evil was sounding in his head, and he was fierce and afraid. After he had probed the night with his senses, he went to the place by the side post where the pearl was buried. He dug it up and brought it to his sleeping mat. And under his sleeping mat, he dug another little hole in the dirt floor, buried the pearl, and covered it up again. So what did Kino just do to the pearl?
He moved it.
He moved it. That's right. So he went and he dug it up, brought it under his sleeping mat. He dug a hole, stuck it there. He's going to put his mat, he's going to sleep right on top of it.
That's a good idea.
Say what?
That's a good idea.
Oh, yeah. At least he's catching on here. Took him long enough. And Juana, sitting by the fire hole, watched him with questioning eyes. And when he had buried his pearl, she asked, "Who do you fear?" Kino searched for a true answer, and at last he said, "Everyone." And he could feel a shell of hardness drawing over him. What else have we encountered in this story with a hard shell? What?
The Scorpio?
The scorpion, there you go. This shell of hardness. After a while, they lay down together on the sleeping mat, and Juana did not put the baby in his box tonight, but cradled him in her arms and covered his face with her head shawl. And the last light went out of the embers in the fire hole. But Kino's brain burned, even during his sleep, and he dreamed that Coyotito could read, that one of his own people could tell him the truth of things. And in his dream, Coyotito was reading from a book as large as a house, with letters as big as dogs, and the words galloped and played on the book. And then darkness spread over the page. And with the darkness came the music of evil again, and Kino stirred in his sleep, and when he stirred, Juana's eyes opened in the darkness, and then Kino awakened with the evil music pulsing in him, and he lay in the darkness with his ears alert. You know how it is when you wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, something woke you up and you kind of feel all nervous and stuff? That's what's happening with Kino right now. But get this. Then from the corner of the house came a sound so soft that it might have simply been a thought, a little furtive movement, a touch of foot on earth, the almost inaudible purr of controlled breathing. Kino held his breath to listen, and he knew that whatever dark thing was in his house was holding its breath too, to listen. For a time, no sound at all came from the corner of the brush house. Then Kino might have thought he had imagined the sound, but Juana's hand came creeping over to him in warning. And then the sound came again, the whisper of a foot on dry earth and the scratch of fingers in the soil. Who's in the house?
The doctor.
Probably not the doctor.
Probably the neighbors.
Probably the doctor's servant. Because the doctor, remember when he kind of tricked Kino into showing him where the pearl was originally hidden, and he hears him digging over there. So I would bet the doctor, because it talks about how unshapely he is, I would bet that he would not go and do it. I bet he would send somebody. That seems like the kind of character he is. And now a wild fear surged in Kino's breast. and on the fear came rage, as it always did. Kino's hand crept into his breast where his knife hung on a string, and he sprang like an angry cat, leaped, striking, and spitting for the dark thing he knew was in the corner of the house. He felt cloth, struck at it with his knife and missed, struck again and felt his knife go through cloth, and then his head crashed with lightning and exploded with pain. There was a soft scurry in the doorway and running steps for a moment, and then silence. So Kino got a hold to the person, but what'd they do to him?
They knocked him out.
Knocked him in the head, yeah. Kino could feel warm blood running from his forehead, and he could hear Juana calling to him, Kino, Kino! And there was terror in her voice. Then coldness came over him as quickly as the rage had, and he said, I am all right. The thing has gone. He groped his way back to the sleeping mat. Already Juana was working at the fire. She uncovered an ember from the ashes and shredded little pieces of corn husk over it and blew a little flame into the corn husk so that a tiny light danced through the hut. And then from a secret place, Juana brought a little piece of consecrated candle and lighted it at the flame and set it upright on a fireplace stone. She worked quickly, crooning it as she moved about. She dipped the end of her head shawl in water and swabbed the blood from Kino's bruised forehead. It is nothing, Kino said, but his eyes and his voice were hard and cold, and a brooding hate was growing in them. Now the tension, which had been growing in Juana, boiled up to the surface, and her lips were thin. This thing is evil, she cried harshly. This pearl is like a sin. It will destroy us. And her voice rose shrilly. Throw it away, Kino. Let us break it between stones. Let us bury it and forget the place. Let us throw it back into the sea. It has brought evil. Kino, my husband, it will destroy us. And in the firelight, her lips and her eyes were alive with her fear. But Kino's face was set, and his mind and his will were set. This is our one chance, he said. Our son must go to school. He must break out of the pot that holds us in. It will destroy us all, Juana cried, even our son. Hold on. What's that smelling? Huh? An answer? I think it smells like a literary element. Let's keep going. Hush, said Kino. Do not speak anymore. In the morning we will sell the pearl, and then the evil will be gone, and only the good remain. Now hush, my wife. His dark eyes scowled into the little fire, and for the first time he knew that his knife was still in his hands, and he raised the blade and looked at it, saw a little line of blood on the steel. For a moment he seemed about to wipe the blade on his trousers, but then plunged the knife into the earth and so cleansed it. What is Kino becoming? What's the adjective? Dark eyes.
Evil.
And there you go. The distant roosters began to crow, and the air changed, and the dawn was coming. The wind of the morning ruffled the water of the estuary and whispered through the mangroves, and the little waves beat on the rubbly beach with an increased tempo. Kino raised the sleeping mat and dug up his pearl and put it in front of him and stared at it. And the beauty of the pearl, winking and glimmering in the light of the little candle, cozened his brain with its beauty. So lovely it was, so soft, and its own music came from it. Its music of promise and delight, its guarantee of the future, of comfort, of security. Its warm lucence promised a poultice against illness and a wall against insult. It closed a door on hunger. And as he stared at it, Kino's eyes softened and his face relaxed. He could see the little image of the consecrated candle reflected in the soft surface of the pearl. And he heard again in his ears the lovely music of the undersea, the tone of the diffused green light of the sea bottom. Juana, glancing secretly at him, saw him smile. And because they were in some way one thing and one purpose, she smiled with him. And they began this day with hope. Thank you.